Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're here at the Toronto Debating Society on April the 30th, 2013 for a random roles debate. Tonight's motion is Torontonians would benefit from the privatization of the TTC. And unlike most debates, I'm going to now give you the definition which the four debaters already know. By Torontonians, we mean residents of Toronto. By would benefit from, we mean would be best served by. And by privatization of the TTC, we mean a transit system operated by private service providers. I am now going to draw a name from this bag, one of the four names, and that person will come and be your Prime Minister. Our Prime Minister for tonight is Lucas. Please join us, Lucas.
Thank you for coming here. No fall so deep that grace cannot descend it, and no height so lofty that grace cannot lift the sinner to it. There's been much debate over the past couple of months, years, decades regarding a better means for transit. Toronto is undergoing a rapid state of expansion. Many estimates are from 2 to 3 million new residents will move into the big smoke. This means two things. The rich will move downtown and they'll drive their luxury cars, while the middle-income poor will find cheaper, cost-effective homes north of Bloor and outside the downtown core. This is called the donut effect. One look at the skyline of Toronto and we see rows of new condominiums. This is testament that while the rest of the world is receding in economic and political chaos, Toronto is forging onwards towards a better tomorrow. More condos, more people, more commerce, more prosperity, more jobs. The key thing this government wishes to press upon: for a city to grow, government services must recede. It is up to the people of this city in transformation to ultimately serve one another, for themselves to figure out the best solutions in an ever-growing metropolis. Torontonians would benefit from the privatization of the TTC. It is time for Toronto to leave the proverbial nest and become the artists of their own destiny. As of now, the TTC is the most expensive transit system in North America. Transit fares are basically costing, per month, you would have to take 48 trips in that month to make up for your Metro Pass. It is absolutely ridiculous. It is easily the most expensive. We need the private sector to meet the needs of a growing city. With downtown Toronto growing increasingly expensive, you will see, like, I blabbed about that already. There are several dozen ways of approaching this topic, but here's something to consider. This is the one point I shall make and impress upon you. There's a list of every year, the Ontario government releases a list called the Sunshine List. Basically, any public government employee making over $100,000 a year will be made public. That's for $100,000 and up. There are currently 12,449 people working for the TTC. As of 2012, 1,400 are making over $100,000 a year. 217 of them are operators, 21 are station collectors. Station collectors. Yes, that person in a booth that hands you tokens for cash. That's $140 million for those 1,400. That's 1 out of every 8 TTC employee makes over 100 grand. $100,000 to hand out tokens. The average nurse's salary is $70,000. A bank teller who hands out thousands of dollars daily, the median wage is $35,000 to $70,000. 1 out of every 8 TTC employees. And that's only what you know. You don't know like how many are making $9,999 and under. Ask yourself this. Do these salaries justify the government growing to demand new revenue tools, which are code for taxes solely to feed this beast? Privatization would do what no politician was capable of doing: starve the beast. This in itself makes the case. Torontonians would benefit from the privatization of TTC, for only a government-run behemoth like the TTC would allow for such obscene salaries. Let me repeat this. The current TTC run is an obscenity. Has civil servants, the TTC, become our very own modern-day Praetorian Guard, where a Roman-style bureaucracy wields absolute power, and our elected leaders are nothing more than sweepers in the corridors of power? This must stop! Just like Rome's first Christian emperor, Constantine the Great, he has put an end to Praetorian Guard. We too need our own road to Damascus, come to Jesus moment. What I ask is that We, the government, we reject the cynicism that private business is solely out to ruin our city. We believe that the private sector and that the customer is always right, and that there's a better way. Privatization means new blood, a new perspective, a new way of looking at transit. Direct democracy. It's 2013. Our transit system lacks routine maintenance, yet it's most expensive in North America. We don't even have Wi-Fi. A lot of other cities have it. This is only but a fraction of what the TTC could do to improve the service. I listed a whole bunch of things here in terms of the fact that you can even enter a coffee shop and they give free Wi-Fi, and they don't have that for the TTC. We're paying a lot of money for this, people. A private company will do one thing which their public counterparts has been weak at doing: listen. In closing, privatization, the ability to own something, is a relatively new concept. The world is in a state of rapid change. We can no longer operate on 5-year plans. What we need is the flexibility of a privately run partnership to meet the needs of Torontonians' transit requirements. It gives one moment to ponder. In Scripture, Saul of Tarsus was on the road to Damascus to arrest the apostles of Christ, when suddenly Saul underwent an incredible transformation as written. No fall so deep that grace cannot descend it, no height so lofty that grace cannot lift the sinner to it. Upon arrival to Damascus, Saul became Apostle Paul. What that means is, a man who has dedicated his life to destroying Christ saw the light. I too have seen the light, and that is from an oncoming TTC subway operated by a privately run company. And you can see the light too, people. We don't have to maintain the status quo. We can change it. Life is changed. People, transform. Arise. Vote yes. Torontonians would benefit from privatization of the TTC.
Thank you very much, Lucas. And now, before your very eyes, I'm going to ask Lucas to choose his opponent.
I'm on my road to Damascus.
Okay, Tony, feel free.
Dean.
Dean.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, the resolution before us is that Torontonians would benefit from the privatization of the TTC, and I'm here to tell you that we would not benefit. Despite what the Prime Minister is pontificating in his awakening Jesus moments, as it were, I will let you know that although he seems to be spending a lot of time underground and rising and using that metaphor, ladies and gentlemen, the underground situation for the TTC would not benefit from privatization. And in fact, it would go further down underground if it were privatized. Let me tell you right now that the suggestion of the ticket collectors making copious amounts of money on the Sunshine List, well, if they're stuck working overtime because nobody else is available, their agreement says they get paid that rate. That's the way it is. That's the way it works for police officers, firefighters, other private people working as well, depending on the agreement. So that's just the way it is. If the government wants to change that agreement, that's something different. That's not privatizing. You can rewrite the agreement. The Prime Minister suggested that he believes that there is a better way, and ironically, the TTC's motto is the better way, and we suggest that keeping it public is indeed the better way. The current CEO of the TTC is listening to customers, is listening to City Hall, is listening to even private industry, and taking suggestions from his experience in London, England. If the TTC is privatized, service that we see currently would be cut at least in half. Private industry doesn't care about serving old ladies in this part of the city because they need to get to the doctors or this or that. They make money, that's it. You're not on the list of them making money? Too bad for you. Take a taxi, get somewhere else, ride a bike. The TTC is a public service for the public. The taxpayers pay for it. If there is an issue about money control, that's the budgetary concerns of the TTC's board or of City Hall. But private industry is not the solution. Even public-private cooperation, if you will, is not the solution. Private industry has already shown recently that they can't manage foreign workers. So if they're not able to follow the rules unless they are strictly written out because it's not going to make them money, they're not going to do it. Toronto has a proud history of transportation in the city. Public since 1921, when it took over the private industries that ended up going bankrupt because they couldn't manage with the people using the service. The other issue about it being the most expensive system in North America, well, when you don't have a federal government pitching in, and Mike Harris's government in '96 stopped funding it, the fare box is it, and property taxes is it, ladies and gentlemen. Tell the provincial government and the federal government to do what other provincial or state and federal governments around the world are doing, which is funding public transit to the extent it needs to be to make it better, at least good, for the people who are using it. Taxpayers, visitors, and the like. Starving the beast was another issue that was brought up. Well, the beast, again, may not have to be starved. The beast is currently the government that does not want to fund it, that says we don't have the money for it, while people sit in their cars waiting to get to work, sit on a bus waiting to get to work, don't have a bus or a streetcar because they don't come because there's no money to fund it. That's the issue. The issue is that private industry is not going to address that. They're going to look at the bottom line only. Highway 407 is a prime example. It was a public institution until it was sold off, and now the costs have ballooned since it was sold in the late 90s. And now it costs double what it originally did to drive on the highway, should you choose to. This will happen with the fares, because that's how the private company will make money for its shareholders, or its employees, or its CEO. They don't care about the public good. They care about their purse. That's why the TTC needs to remain in public hands. In addition, anybody who works for the TTC, you can pretty much guarantee half of them are gone. Or they'll be offered, like those people with private garbage collection, well, you're going to take a $10 an hour cut, or whatever it might be, or we'll find somebody that'll do it for cheap. Now, the argument from the government, well, you're still getting good service, they're still collecting the garbage, away we go. After years and years and years of no raises, no money because la la la, crying poor from the company, while the CEO makes a fat check and the shareholders make fat checks and dividends, I don't know if I were an employee working for that company how thrilled I'd be to go to work every day and put my best foot forward. Government will argue, well, public, we don't have to do anything. Sit on their butts. They'll sit in their collector's booths and sit and collect money and not worry about it. Yes, private industry does that too, ladies and gentlemen. They'll sit at the photocopier, the water cooler, chat about baseball, not do their work. That's what happens. So you can't paint everyone with the same brush. There are good bus drivers, there are good subway car drivers, there are good streetcar drivers, there are good collectors, good staff. And currently, the CEO of the TTC is turning it around. The government here will have you believe it has to happen like this, and private is the way to do it. No, a directed public service with clear goals and clear expectations and good money put behind it, ladies and gentlemen, will give you what you need in terms of a good transit system. Privatizing is the quick and easy. It's the simple, it's the no effort way. Do not privatize the TTC.
Thank you very much, Dean. And now we'll have Dean choose the member of the government who will be our next speaker.
David.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, we have heard tonight that any privatization actually has to take the route that privatization has taken in the past. That it has to go the route of corrupt governments and so forth. So mentioned was Mike Harris's sale of the 407, which cost $2 billion to build and was sold for about $100 million, about 5% of the cost. And since then, of course, the company has been given extortion rights and has been sticking it to the public ever since, with about a 400% increase in fares. But does that actually have to be the case? The infrastructure involved in roads and transit is such that a company can make a darn good profit and still give public service, and there's numerous examples. For example, British Rail was privatized in 1996, and in that time there's been no noticeable increase in fares beyond the normal amount that you would expect over time. But it was privatized under very, very strict terms. So when a consortium is called in and given a long-term agreement to run a transit system for a major metropolitan area, you don't give it a license to print money or screw the public or lay off large numbers of workers. That's not the case. There are many, many good arguments for privatization. I'd like to mention three. First of all, freedom from political interference. Two, harmonization of traffic policy to complement transit policy. And finally, integration of the present players into a single harmonized system. A privately run system operates at arm's length, and it's inured from and immune from the reach of the policy company. His henchmen cannot reach into that company and have somebody fired because their vision of transit does not agree with his. That's impossible. Transit, the company has that built-in immunity, that kind of thing, so it's free from political interference. You remember there about a couple of years ago, Gary Webster, an eminent authority working for the TTC, was fired because he didn't kowtow to the council's vision. The second point, that a harmonization of traffic policy to complement transit policy. In many European cities now, you pay a very heavy tax to take a car into the downtown, or they put in speed bumps to discourage the traffic. This encourages people to take transit, and it altogether means a better environment, a better air to breathe and so forth. So what we would have here under a harmonized, privatized system whereby the various players sit down with government and come up with a plan is that we can remodel the downtown to make it transit friendly. And that will mean, of course, that any consideration of future building of roads has to take that into account. Maybe we'll decide to take the Gardner down completely and not rebuild a thing. Maybe that's what it needs. But it is possible when the various bodies sit down. And finally, I'd like to mention that the integration of the present players into a single harmonized system. Right now we have a mess. We have Metrolinx that was founded in 2006 to bring a harmonized vision for the Toronto-Hamilton area. And they have been fighting like cats and dogs ever since. We've got TTC, GO, My Way in Mississauga, Vaughan Transit, Scarborough Transit, all pulling in different directions and all fighting for the transit dollar. That's what happens when you have public bodies crossing municipal and provincial and even federal lines, and the political vision only being a few years at a time. Everything gets sacrificed to the egos and everything else. A harmonized, privatized system can get rid of that. It can bring those companies together into a consortium so that we have something like we see now in Sao Paulo in Brazil, or in Buenos Aires, or in France, where there's so many levels, even all privatized, but working together into a harmonized whole. And that is quite possible. The dark vision that the leader of the opposition has pointed out, that we all have to go the way of graft, is too dark a picture. It doesn't answer the realism. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. And for our last speaker, without drawing from a hat, we have Louis.
It is with amazement tonight that I hear the government proposing privatization as a route forward, a way of lowering prices. Go and look at the literature that is available. There is no clear evidence of that. Let's take a look in Victoria in Australia. Melbourne, they privatized their system in 1999. There's been a 100% increase in the price from their fully privatized system. Let's go and look at the UK, how we save so much money by privatizing. Because the problem is, when you privatize public transit, what happens is we have an essential service, and if the government has its way, it's not happy with just the TTC. It wants to privatize Go, Via Rail, everything, the whole federal province. They want it all privatized in the hands of unscrupulous companies that would essentially become a monopoly too large to fail. The alternative that they suggest might be where we have competition between different entities. But as they said themselves, because we have competition between YRT, Go, TTC, the current government bodies, the government, in their own words, say this mishmash does not work. I agree with the government. A mishmash of privatized companies has not worked in any government where it's been tried. Take the UK, for example, where they privatized the rail system. We had the rail network being run and protected by the government and the infrastructure. And then we had the private companies like Richard Branson, a notable person who knows how to run a company. Look at Virgin Airlines. He went bankrupt. How much did it cost London to buy back the system that they tried for the public partner? $1 billion. That's what it cost because it didn't fail. They couldn't afford to have it fail. The TTC, yes, it has its problems, but really, we're expecting a company to invest in something public transit inherently costs money to run. A private company that is too large to fail, which is what a public transit system would become, as a monopoly like the government suggests, what happens is you get extorted prices for the goods, for the services. Unions get pushed out, wages go down. This is not what we need here in Toronto. Public safety becomes more of an issue. Virgin Trains, 1999, 38 people killed, 600 injured because of the privatization. I suggest you go to your public library. Take a look at Christian Woolman's book, Down the Tube. You will see what happens when you privatize your system. As my partner has presented, it is a very dark road that you take. Public service is for the public. We don't allow one or two individuals to run our system. Who is going to pick up your granny? Who's going to, when you live in the parts of Toronto that's not served, private companies will support where there is most profit, downtown only. The first thing that we saw in the UK, they broke the unions because it's not okay for people to have fair working conditions. I urge you strongly, do not support this government. Support the public and support a strong Toronto.
Thank you, Louis. I now call on the Leader of the Opposition for his 2-minute summation.
We are encouraged by the government to privatize the Toronto Transit Commission because it would be in your best interests. And we, the opposition, feel we have presented a good case as to why you should not privatize. The reasons are as follows. You will not get the same level of service. Profit-driven service will not be as extensive as the current publicly funded service is. If you are in an outlying area, you think it's bad now, it will be worse later if it is privatized. Proper government funding from the federal and provincial governments, as well as city governments, is required to run an effective system throughout the City of Toronto. Subways, buses, streetcars, LRTs, and the like. And they can integrate with other traffic modes, vehicles, bicycles, and the like, so that everybody gets around as they need to get around and everyone is served fairly and well. Financially, we would suffer as well if the TTC were privatized. It will cost you more because of, again, the profit-driven company running the TTC. The service will go down. And there is no guarantee that where you want to get to will be accessible to you. Staffing levels will be dropped to below what they are now. Workers will be laid off, let go, no incomes, no service. And the history of privately taking over industries such as the 407 should give you pause and ask yourself why not to privatize the TTC.
Thank you, Dean. And for our final speaker, Lucas.
Thank you. Thank you. What you're hearing from the opposition, their whole argument, if you had to summate it down to one single word, it's the word fear. And we don't believe in that. Our government is fearless in terms of honestly believe that a proverbial Praetorian Guard, I go back to that point, if you look at history, it's always been replete with this, where it's the bureaucracy, it's the system that eventually becomes the beast. And he's talking, the opposition is talking about starving the beast, they're saying that the beast needs to be better maintained and everything. It's a rough beast. He's talking about how employees' salaries can get cut. Okay, let's say a toll booth collector gets their salary cut from $100,000 to, let's say, $50,000. Is that really bad? They're collecting tokens. What private industry would do is they would actually ask the same questions. They would ask, is this really worth it what we're paying here? Is that salary justifiable? And in terms of hours, all these games about playing overtime and everything, that's where the private sector would call it to task. As for monopolies, it's not going to be a monopoly because we're just subcontracting it out to the private sector. We're not giving them the keys to the kingdom and carte blanche. If they don't do what we don't like, we can get rid of them. That's a simple. It's like with any type of company that you hire. It won't be a monopoly. It'll be basically us going to the free market. You look at monopolizations, you look at the phone system. Were we really better under Bell? And as to my seconder, I absolutely agree with him. The UK Transit is a stellar example. When they privatized it, life became so much better. Even down to the sandwiches actually apparently improved, I heard on there one time. I saw a documentary on it. It's fantastic. The sandwiches, they actually anyways. As for unions, there's another union that's speaking up, and that's the Union of Toronto. And that's far bigger and greater than any other type of weapon or army fleet. We represent the people of Toronto, and we say Toronto would benefit from privatizing the TTC.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we now have the adjudicator joining us, giving us his outcome.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, this was a fun debate to adjudicate. As I mentioned before the debate began, I was going to completely disregard the fact that this was a random rolls debate and judge this as a purely regular debate. This was a challenge the debaters put on themselves. And the scores actually reflect that challenge. There is a clear winner tonight, but it's definitely not by a wide margin, and it's not one of the best debates that it could have been. So let's go ahead and go through each of the individual areas. So we've got argument, content, rebuttal and refutation, teamwork, and then style and rhetoric. So first, I'd like to talk about the arguments. This is where the debaters independently had a chance to research everything about the topic on both sides and present their strongest arguments. I'm going to speak about the government together. I found that the government's arguments were sometimes well developed and sometimes well explained. So, for example, I would like to say that for the Prime Minister, it took a while to kind of ramp up into the arguments. There was a lot of pretext, which is fine, but it meant that when we finally got to the arguments, I really want to hear some clear, this is argument 1, argument 2, and have them clearly delineated. And we heard that from the government seconder, but we really didn't get that from both sides. So we had some arguments which I would qualify as not clear, and other ones I would qualify as very clear from the government side. So a bit of a mixed bag there. And moving over to the opposition, the leader of the opposition, Dean, had some very clear arguments, well articulated, powerful and persuasive, well done. And Louis, the opposition seconder, fewer arguments, but they also meshed better with what your team member actually said. However, I didn't feel that they were as strong, and I thought that they might have been a little bit off topic in some areas. I'm going to get into a bit of detail about that later, but that was just my only comment about that one. The summation is an opportunity for the leaders to reiterate all of their arguments and everything that was important. And from the government side, the summation was more of a final rebuttal. It did not mention any of the government seconder's points, so it was very isolated. And on the opposition side, almost the same problem, kind of covered everything, except didn't mention the monopoly issue, which was the central thrust of the opposition seconder's case. So some significant problems with the arguments for both sides. However, the winner from the points value for just the argument is the opposition. Moving into content. So this is how the debaters support their arguments with materials. We had actually a lot of really good content. There was definitely a lot of good research done, lots of great examples. There were fewer on the government side than the opposition side. So quite simply because of that, the opposition takes this area as well, just because of the quality and the relevance and the quantity of the supporting arguments. Plus, I have to actually mark here about the government seconder when talking about the 407. There was a beginning of your presentation where you talked about how that was an example, and it became a rebuttal. You said, does that always have to be the case? And then went into the UK, and actually this is one of your arguments that was actually mentioned again by your Prime Minister. However, the way that you began it by talking about it and characterizing it as extortion, I was thinking, I hope you remember which side you're on, because it really felt like it was for the other side. Simply the way that you presented it. The base of your rebuttal and your content was in the right direction, but the way it was presented and within that context, it really didn't work and cost the government some points. And moving over into now, falling right into rebuttal and refutation, again, there's the inconsistencies that hurt the government. And also I'd like to say that because there's only one person that has an opportunity to rebut officially, because Lucas, I know you tried to get a few in there in your final summation, it really is up to the government seconder. And Dean handed them to you on a silver platter, says arguments 1, 2, and 3, and I didn't really hear a nice, clear rebuttal to each of them. I didn't really get that. So the rebuttals could have definitely been stronger. And that doesn't require very much preparation at all. And so moving over to the opposition side, on the other hand, the leader of the opposition did a great job picking up on all the arguments put forward and rebutted them. And actually, something that came interesting out of this debate was the use of the word beast. Both sides used the word beast in their arguments and rebuttals, and both of them used it differently to convey a different idea. Well, what is the beast? The beast is the TTC. It's all of this money. And it's like, no, the beast is the government because it's neglecting the TTC. And the beast being the government was an odd stance for the opposition to take because they are in favor of publicly funded systems. So it was risky. That's what I would say. It was risky, but I actually think it paid off. Just that was interesting, the way that the debate actually kind of hit in the middle there. So that was great. And so, but simply when you're hitting that, and because there were two people that actually used their opportunities to hit those rebuttals, the opposition wins the rebuttal and refutation section as well. Moving on to our fourth pillar, teamwork. This is where I knew the debate would come down to, because this is, again, a random rules debate. I really wanted to see how well the debaters would, on their feet, put in some teamwork. And the only place I really saw this happen was on the opposition. The arguments about public safety and public good, they really fit together. And otherwise, the government, the way that the debaters got matched up and the way that their arguments were already set, they just didn't flow very well together. It didn't feel like they were coming from a single source of research. And of course, this falls to the seconders to try and make sure that that fits together. And Louis, you mentioned specifically Dean's example about the granny when you were talking about the public safety and good. So you clearly already had your public safety arguments set to go, but then you kind of shifted it into being about public safety and public good. So that was a very good job there. Finally, style and rhetoric. I'll go through each person individually. The Prime Minister, it was a lot of reading, and I know as the Prime Minister that's all you have to work with, but it was very obviously reading for the most part, and that caught you up in a few places with some stops and stumbles, so just try and not have a word-for-word presentation. And you also had 1.5 minutes left from your first speech, which is a serious point deduction, because you need to use your time. However, on the other side, you had a lot of flair and a lot of passion, and that's great. So just get rid of those, work on those negatives so you can really have those positives show, because that was a very good presentation. It was just, it was a shame that it was faulted by some of those negatives. For the government seconder, crisp, confident, but I was a little concerned with those inconsistencies, so that kind of hurt your credibility. Moving over to the opposition, confident and clear and passionate was what I got from the opposition. So again, the opposition took this pillar as well. So that's actually a clear, each one was a victory by the opposition, but the point totals are actually not that different. The opposition has won the debate with a score of 57 to the government's 40. And could I have the adjudicator's cup to present, please? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, leader of the government, the leader of the opposition. Congratulations. And Louis, actually, you are the recipient of the best debater for this evening.
Oh, wow.
Because of your ability to add the teamwork to the debate. So well done.
15 foot of them.
You put them together. Congratulations, Mr. Speaker.
That's right.
Best debater? Oh, he's doing it. Okay.
This lovely trophy that you see here is for the public vote. And the result of the public vote was 11-3 in favor of the opposition. So,
Okay, here we go. I guess we're out again. There we go.
Oh, that was great.
there you go. There you go. Which brings our events of this evening to a conclusion.